First contact. Fear unleashed. The night sky above the forest was unusually clear, glittering with stars that seemed to mock the chaos below. Ara crouched low in the dense underbrush, her three-fingered hand trembling as she adjusted the tiny device on her wrist. The scanner hummed faintly, displaying a 3D map of her surroundings in glowing blue light. The human figures were moving closer. Ara's breathing was shallow, her translucent skin shimmering faintly in the moonlight. She had always feared humans. The stories her elders had told her painted them as brutal, merciless creatures who thrived on war and destruction. She had vowed never to come near them. Yet here she was, on their planet, alone and vulnerable. A twig snapped nearby, and Ara's heart pounded in her chest. Her large, almond-shaped eyes darted toward the sound. She tapped the wrist device again, silencing its hum. The scanner showed one human closer than the others, about 20 feet away. The rest were further back, moving methodically as though they were searching for something or someone. She clenched her jaw, wincing as pain flared in her left leg. The crash landing had been worse than she'd anticipated. Her ship had been destroyed, and the emergency escape pod had barely kept her alive. Now she was stranded on Earth, with no way to contact her people and no guarantee she would survive the night. The human was close now, too close. Ara tightened her grip on the small, spherical device in her hand. It was a weapon, one of the few she had managed to salvage from her escape pod. She had never used it before, but she knew how it worked. A single press of the button would release a shockwave strong enough to knock out any living creature within a 10-foot radius. It wouldn't kill them, but it would buy her time to escape. The bushes rustled, and Ara froze. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the faint glow of a flashlight. It was a human male, young, with a backpack slung over one shoulder. He stopped abruptly when his eyes met hers. Ara's heart raced. The stories were true. They were terrifying. The human's face was angular, his eyes small and piercing, his build sturdy and strong. His hands were raised slightly, palms open, as if to show he was unarmed. But Ara wasn't fooled. Humans were deceitful, capable of hiding their true intentions behind friendly gestures. "Hey," the human said softly, his voice calm but curious. "I'm not gonna hurt you." Ara's grip on the weapon tightened. She couldn't understand his words, but his tone was unsettling. Was this a trick? She shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through her injured leg. The human noticed and took a cautious step forward. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. He seemed genuinely concerned, but Ara wasn't sure if it was real or an act. She raised the weapon slightly, and the human stopped moving. Okay, he said, raising his hands higher. "I'll stay back." Ara's chest rose and fell rapidly. She wanted to run, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The adrenaline coursing through her veins made her feel lightheaded. The human crouched down slowly, reaching into his backpack. Ara tensed, ready to fire the weapon at a moment's notice. "Look," he said, pulling out a small rectangular object wrapped in shiny material. He peeled it open, revealing what looked like food. A strange, brownish bar. He broke off a piece and ate it himself, then held the rest out to her. Ara blinked, her mind racing. Was this an offering? Or a trap? She glanced at the other humans on the scanner. They were still far enough away. But she didn't have much time. Her stomach growled, betraying her desperation. She hadn't eaten since the crash, and her energy reserves were nearly depleted. The human placed the food on the ground and stepped back. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he didn't want to scare her. Ara hesitated, her weapon still aimed at him. Finally, she reached out with trembling fingers and snatched the food, retreating quickly. She sniffed it cautiously. It smelled strange, but not unpleasant. Taking a small bite, she chewed slowly, her eyes never leaving the human. The taste was surprisingly good, sweet and filling. She hated herself for liking it. The human smiled slightly, but his expression quickly shifted as he glanced over his shoulder. Era followed his gaze and saw the faint glow of flashlights in the distance. The other humans were getting closer. "We need to move," the human said, his voice urgent. He pointed toward the trees, gesturing for her to follow. Era shook her head, her instincts screaming not to trust him. But what choice did she have? She couldn't outrun the others, not with her injured leg. The human extended a hand, his eyes meeting hers again. "Please," he said softly. Era hesitated, her mind a whirlwind of fear and doubt. The stories of human cruelty echoed in her head, but something about this one felt different. Against her better judgment, she tucked the weapon into her belt and took a cautious step toward him. The sound of voices grew louder. The other humans were closing in. Era's heart pounded as she took the human's hand, her skin flinching at the warmth of his touch. Together, they disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving the approaching lights behind. For the first time in her life, Era wondered if everything she had been told about humans might not be the full truth. But could she really trust him? Only time would tell. A misunderstood threat. The forest was silent except for the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Era moved cautiously, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows for danger. The human, Eli, as he had introduced himself, walked a few steps ahead, glancing back every so often to make sure she was following. His flashlight cut through the darkness, casting eerie shapes on the trees. Era still didn't trust him. How could she? Every step she took beside him felt like walking into a trap. Her wrist device buzzed faintly, warning her that the other humans were closing in. She thought about running, but her injured leg wouldn't carry her far. Besides, Eli seemed to know where he was going. That was the only reason she hadn't abandoned him yet. Eli suddenly stopped, raising his hand. "Wait," he whispered, turning to face her. His voice was low, but the sound still made Era's heart race. She froze, her fingers brushing the small weapon hidden at her side. He pointed toward a faint glimmer in the distance. "There's a stream up ahead. We'll be safer there. Harder for them to track us." Era tilted her head, not understanding his words but recognizing his tone. It wasn't threatening. It was careful. He motioned for her to follow and started moving again. Reluctantly, she limped after him. When they reached the stream, Era knelt by the water's edge, dipping her fingers into the cool current. She splashed it on her face, the cold sharp against her skin, and felt a small wave of relief. Eli sat a few feet away, rummaging through his backpack. He pulled out a roll of cloth and a bottle of clear liquid. Era tensed as he approached her, her eyes narrowing. Eli stopped, holding up the items. "For your leg," he said, pointing at her injury. He unscrewed the bottle and poured a little of the liquid onto the cloth, then dabbed it against his own arm to show it wasn't harmful. Era's gaze darted between him and the cloth. She didn't trust him, but the sharp pain in her leg was getting worse. After a long moment, she nodded, just barely. Eli crouched beside her and gently pulled back the fabric of her suit to reveal the wound, a deep gash, oozing a faintly blue liquid. He paused, staring at it in awe. "That's different," he murmured. Era flinched, gripping her weapon instinctively. Eli quickly looked away, focusing on cleaning the wound. The antiseptic stung, and Era hissed in pain, but she didn't pull away. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Her language wasn't human, but her tone carried the question clearly. Eli glanced up, as though sensing her meaning. "You looked scared," he said simply. "I couldn't just leave you out here." He gave a small shrug, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Era frowned. His response confused her. Humans weren't supposed to care about others, especially not creatures like her. Was this a trick? Or was he different somehow? Before she could think further, her wrist device buzzed again. The humans were closer now. Too close. Era's chest tightened. She grabbed Eli's arm, startling him, and pointed toward the direction of the approaching signals. Her large eyes were wide with urgency. Eli understood. "They're coming," he said, his voice low. He stood quickly, helping Era to her feet. "We need to go. Now." But as they turned to leave, a sharp beam of light pierced through the trees, landing directly on them. "There. Over there," a voice shouted. Era's heart sank. They'd been found. Eli grabbed her hand and pulled her forward, his movements quick but steady. "This way," he shouted, his voice filled with determination. Era stumbled after him, her injured leg protesting with every step. The humans behind them were shouting now, their voices echoing through the forest. For a brief moment, Era considered stopping, facing them head-on. She had her weapon. She could fight. But something held her back. Maybe it was the way Eli was risking his life for her, or maybe it was the faint growing hope that not all humans were as cruel as she had been told. They ran until Era's lungs burned, until the shouts of their pursuers grew faint. Finally, they stumbled into a small clearing, hidden by thick undergrowth. Eli crouched behind a fallen tree, pulling Era down beside him. Both of them were breathing hard, their eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of their hunters. After a long silence, Eli spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you? Why are they after you?" Era stared at him, unsure how to respond. Could she trust him with the truth? Her hand hovered over the weapon at her side, a constant reminder of the risk she was taking. "They want something I have," she said finally, her voice quiet. Eli tilted his head, waiting for her to continue. Era hesitated, then tapped the small, glowing device embedded in her wrist. "This," she said, her tone filled with both fear and defiance. "It's not just a tracker. It's a key, and they'll do anything to take it from me." Eli's expression darkened. "A key to what?" Era hesitated, then looked him in the eye. "To a weapon, one that could destroy everything." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Eli's gaze flickered between her face and the device on her wrist. For the first time, Era saw something in his eyes that wasn't fear or curiosity. It was resolve. "Then we'll make sure they don't get it," he said firmly. Era blinked, taken aback by his conviction. She had expected betrayal, but instead, she found an ally. Whether she liked it or not, their fates were now intertwined. The humans weren't just after her anymore. They were after both of them. And the chase was far from over. Secrets of the alien world. The cave was silent except for the distant sound of water dripping from the stone ceiling. A faint beam of light from Eli's flashlight danced across the jagged walls as he adjusted his grip on it. Era sat in the corner, her back pressed against the cold stone, her large eyes watching him warily. The faint glow of her wrist device illuminated her face, casting eerie shadows that made her look even more otherworldly. Eli had questions, too many of them, but he hadn't asked a single one. Not yet. Era could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze occasionally lingered on her wrist device. She couldn't blame him. Humans were naturally curious, after all, and dangerous. Still, he hadn't turned her in. He hadn't tried to hurt her. That alone made him different. "You're not like them," Era said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft, and her words carried a melodic quality that made her sound almost gentle, but there was suspicion in her tone too. Eli glanced at her, surprised. "Like who?" Era hesitated, then tapped her wrist device. A soft hum filled the cave as a small hologram flickered to life, projecting a scene from her memory. It showed a city, a vibrant, glowing metropolis unlike anything on Earth. Towering structures reached toward the sky, their surfaces shimmering with energy. The streets were filled with Era's people, their translucent skin and graceful movements giving them an almost ethereal presence. Eli leaned closer, his eyes wide. "Is this where you're from?" Era nodded, her expression tinged with sadness. It was. Before the humans came, the hologram shifted, and the vibrant city was replaced with chaos. Explosions rocked the streets, and alien ships crashed into buildings. The sky burned red as human vessels loomed overhead, their weapons raining destruction. Era's people fled in terror, their once beautiful city reduced to rubble. Eli's stomach twisted. Wait, humans did this. Era's gaze hardened. Your kind came to our world, pretending to be peaceful. They studied us, learned our weaknesses, and then they destroyed us. They said it was for survival, for resources. She spat the words like venom. Your species takes what it wants, no matter the cost. Eli didn't know what to say. He looked back at the hologram, at the destruction his kind had caused. It didn't seem possible. Sure, humans had a long history of war and greed, but an attack like this, on a species so advanced, it was hard to wrap his head around. That's not all of us, he said quietly, his voice tinged with guilt. Not everyone is like that. Era's expression didn't soften. It doesn't matter. The damage is done. My people are gone, and the few of us who survived are scattered across the galaxy. Hunted. Alone. The hologram flickered off, plunging the cave back into semi-darkness. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Eli leaned against the wall, trying to process what he'd just seen. It was like something out of a nightmare, except it was real. And Era had lived through it. Finally, he broke the silence. What about the thing you're carrying? The key. Does it have something to do with what happened to your people? Era's eyes narrowed. She didn't want to tell them. She didn't trust him. Not fully. But something about his reaction to the hologram made her hesitate. He hadn't dismissed her story. He hadn't argued or tried to defend his kind. He'd listened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of shame in a human's eyes. It's not just a key, she said slowly. It's part of a weapon. One that was meant to protect us. My people built it as a last resort, a way to fight back if we were ever attacked again. Eli frowned. A weapon? What kind of weapon? Era looked down at her wrist device, her fingers brushing against its glowing surface. One that can destroy entire worlds. Eli's breath caught. He stared at her, his mind racing. A weapon like that, if it fell into the wrong hands. That's why they're after you, he said, realization dawning. The mercenaries. They want the weapon. Era nodded. They work for humans. Your governments. They think if they can get the weapon, they can use it to take over other planets, expand their reach. But they don't understand the risks. It's not just a weapon. It's alive. Eli blinked. Alive. The key is connected to the weapon's core. It reacts to emotions, to intentions. If someone with the wrong motives tries to use it. She trailed off, her voice heavy with fear. It could destroy more than just one world. Eli ran a hand through his hair, his pulse pounding. This was bigger than he'd thought. Bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. He looked at Ara, at the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight she carried. We can't let them get it, he said firmly. We'll figure out a way to keep it safe. Ara studied him, her expression unreadable. Why do you care? You're one of them. Eli hesitated, then met her gaze. Because it's not about what I am. It's about what's right. For the first time, Era felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Maybe, just maybe, she could trust this human. But the sound of distant footsteps shattered the moment. The mercenaries had found their trail again. Era's heart raced. Eli grabbed her arm, his expression grim. Come on, we're not safe here. And just like that, the chase began again. The chase begins. The forest was no longer a refuge. It was a labyrinth of shadows, alive with the relentless pursuit of their hunters. Ara and Eli ran in silence, the only sounds their hurried breaths and the faint rustle of leaves beneath their feet. The night air was cold, biting against their skin, but neither dared to slow down. The faint glow of Era's wrist device cast eerie light on the path ahead, marking her as both their salvation and their curse. Behind them, The low hum of a drone buzzed through the air, its red light scanning the forest floor. Era's pulse quickened as she glanced over her shoulder. She knew the mercenaries wouldn't stop until they had the weapon, or until she was dead. Eli motioned toward a cluster of large boulders up ahead, his voice low but urgent. "We'll hide there." Era hesitated. Hiding felt too much like waiting to be caught. But with her injured leg slowing her down, she didn't have a choice. She nodded reluctantly, and they ducked behind the boulders, pressing themselves against the cold stone. The drone's hum grew louder, its light sweeping dangerously close. Era clenched her fists, her mind racing. She glanced at Eli, who was gripping a branch he'd picked up along the way. It wasn't much of a weapon, but the determination in his eyes made her wonder if he truly believed he could fight off the mercenaries with just that. Why do they want this so badly? Eli whispered, barely audible over the drone. Era hesitated. Telling him more felt risky, but at this point, there was little to lose. "The weapon isn't just powerful," she said softly. "It's intelligent. It can decide who's worthy of using it. But if it falls into the wrong hands, it won't hesitate to destroy everything." Eli's jaw tightened. "And they think they're worthy." "They don't care," Era replied bitterly. "To them, it's just another tool for domination. Another way to control." The drone's light swept past their hiding spot, missing them by inches. Era held her breath, her fingers hovering over the activation switch on her wrist device. She could use it to disable the drone, but the shockwave would give away their position. Eli seemed to read her hesitation. "We'll wait it out," he whispered. "Let it pass." But before the drone could move on, a sharp bark echoed through the forest. Era's heart sank. The mercenaries had released their hounds, cybernetic beasts designed to track and hunt with brutal efficiency. The drone was only the beginning. Eli stiffened. What the hell was that? "Trouble," Era said grimly. "We can't stay here." Without waiting for his response, she stood and began limping deeper into the forest. Eli followed, his makeshift weapon clutched tightly in his hand. As they ran, the sound of the hounds grew louder, their metallic growls reverberating through the trees. Era's leg throbbed with pain, but she pushed herself forward. She couldn't let them catch her. Not again. They burst into a clearing, the moonlight illuminating a crumbling structure, a remnant of some long-forgotten human settlement. Era scanned it quickly. It wasn't ideal, but it would provide temporary cover. "In there," she shouted, pointing toward the structure. Eli didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arm, helping her limp inside. The walls were cracked, and the roof was partially caved in, but it was better than nothing. They crouched in the shadows, listening as the hounds closed in. Era's breathing was shallow, her wrist device beeping faintly. She tapped it, bringing up a holographic map of the area. "There's an old river nearby," she whispered. "If we can reach it, we can lose them." Eli nodded. "Let's move." But before he could finish, one of the hounds appeared at the entrance. Its glowing red eyes locked onto them, and it let out a deafening roar. Eli reacted instantly, swinging the branch with all his strength. The blow landed on the hound's head, knocking it back, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The creature lunged, its claws slashing through the air. Era raised her wrist device, her fingers trembling as she activated the weapon. A pulse of energy shot out, slamming into the hound and sending it crashing into the wall. It sparked and twitched, its circuits fried, but the sound had already alerted the others. "We need to go," Eli shouted, grabbing her hand. They bolted from the structure, the sound of more hounds and mercenaries closing in. The river was their only hope now. Era's wrist device beeped urgently, warning her that the hunters were closing the distance. As they reached the edge of the forest, the ground suddenly sloped downward. The river was dry, its surface rocky and uneven, but it provided some cover. Eli slid down first, reaching up to help Era as she struggled to keep her balance. The mercenaries' voices were close now. Era could hear them shouting orders, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Her chest tightened as she realized they were running out of options. Eli crouched beside her, his face determined. "We'll lose them here. I'll create a diversion. You keep going." "No," Era said firmly. "If you get caught, then I'll figure it out," he interrupted. "But they can't have you. Or the key." Era stared at him, her mind racing. She didn't understand him. He wasn't like the other humans she'd encountered. He wasn't selfish or cruel. He was different. Before she could argue, Eli stood and ran toward the forest, shouting and waving his arms. The mercenaries' lights immediately shifted, following him. Era watched as he disappeared into the shadows, her chest tightening. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't expected. Fear, not for herself, but for him. Clutching her wrist device, she turned and limped deeper into the river. The hunt wasn't over yet, but for the first time, she wasn't running alone. The unexpected alliance. The fire crackled softly in the makeshift pit, its light dancing on the walls of the small cave. Era sat on the far side, her back pressed against the cold stone, her wrist device glowing faintly as it charged. Eli was hunched over near the entrance, scanning the horizon for any signs of pursuit. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the occasional pop of the flames. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Era watched him, her expression cautious but curious. She couldn't understand why he had come back for her. After his diversion had led the mercenaries away, she had thought he'd leave her to fend for herself. But instead, he found her again, dragging his battered body into the cave with nothing but sheer determination. "You're quiet," Eli said suddenly, glancing over his shoulder. His face was streaked with dirt, and there was a fresh cut above his eyebrow. But his tone was light. Era tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "I don't understand you," she said bluntly. Eli raised an eyebrow. "What's there to understand? You needed help, so I helped." "That's not how humans work," she replied, her voice sharper than she intended. "You don't do things unless there's something in it for you. What do you want from me?" Eli sighed, leaning back against the wall. "Look, I'm not going to pretend humans are perfect. We've done a lot of terrible things. But not all of us are like that. Some of us just want to do the right thing." Era frowned, her fingers brushing against the glowing surface of her wrist device. "And you think you're one of the good ones?" Eli shrugged. "I'm trying to be." She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. His words were simple, but there was something about the way he said them, something that felt genuine. Finally, she looked away, her gaze falling on the fire. "My people wouldn't believe you. They think humans are incapable of good, that you only destroy." Eli was silent for a moment. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe that's true for some of us. But what about you? You're willing to fight for your people, aren't you? To protect what matters." Era's eyes snapped back to him. "Of course." "Then why can't I?" he asked, his voice steady. The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. Instead, she stared at him, her mind racing. Could he be right? Could a human really care about something other than themselves? Before she could respond, her wrist device buzzed softly. Era glanced down, her heart sinking as a holographic map appeared, showing a group of red dots moving toward their location. "They'd found us," she said, her voice tight. Eli stood immediately, grabbing the makeshift spear he had crafted earlier. "How far?" "Not far enough," she replied. She tapped the device, pulling up a faint blue line on the map. "There's an old mining tunnel nearby. It leads to a ridge. If we can make it there, we might lose them." Eli nodded, his expression grim. "Then we move now." Era hesitated, glancing at his battered form. "You're injured. You won't make it." Eli smirked, despite the situation. "Neither will you, with that leg. Guess we'll have to limp together." For a moment, she wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him to leave, to save himself. But instead she nodded. "Let's go." They moved quickly, slipping out of the cave and into the dense forest. The red dots on Era's device grew closer, the mercenaries' drones humming faintly in the distance. Her leg throbbed with pain, and every step felt like a struggle, but Eli stayed close, helping her when she stumbled. As they approached the entrance to the mining tunnel, a bright light suddenly cut through the trees. "Over there," a voice shouted. Era's heart raced. A group of mercenaries emerged, their weapons trained on them. Eli didn't hesitate. He grabbed a rock and hurled it at the nearest one, hitting him square in the face. "Run," he yelled, pulling Era toward the tunnel. They darted inside, the darkness swallowing them whole. The sound of gunfire echoed behind them, bullets ricocheting off the stone walls. Era's wrist device glowed faintly, illuminating the narrow path ahead. "This way," she whispered, leading Eli deeper into the tunnel. The mercenaries were close now, their footsteps pounding against the ground. Era's mind raced. She couldn't let them capture her, or the key. "Keep going," she said suddenly, stopping in her tracks. Eli turned, his expression confused. "What?" "No, I'm not leaving you." "You have to," she insisted, her voice firm. "If they get the key, it's over, for both of us." Eli hesitated, then grabbed her shoulders. "We do this together. You hear me? I didn't come this far to leave you behind." Era stared at him, her chest tightening. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. Finally, she nodded. "Together, then." They moved deeper into the tunnel, the sound of the mercenaries fading behind them. But Era knew this was only the beginning. The key was still in danger. And now so was Eli. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just fighting for her survival anymore. She was fighting for his too. The unbelievable twist. The old mining tunnel stretched endlessly into the darkness, its stale, cold air pressing against them like an invisible weight. The faint glow of Era's wrist device was the only source of light, casting long, flickering shadows on the jagged walls. Behind them, the distant sound of footsteps and the mechanical hum of drones echoed faintly. The mercenaries were relentless. But it wasn't just the pursuit that gnawed at Era's mind. Something about the way her wrist device had begun to hum, faintly and irregularly, made her uneasy. The artifact, the key, was reacting to something she didn't yet understand. Eli, walking a few steps ahead, suddenly stopped and turned to her. His face, dirtied and bruised, was lit faintly by the blue glow of the device. "We're getting close to the ridge," he said, his voice low. "But what happens after? You've got a plan, right?" Era hesitated, her sharp features betraying a moment of doubt. "The plan was to escape," she admitted. But now, she looked down at her wrist, where the faint hum of the key was growing stronger. "Now I don't think it will let me." Eli frowned, his brows knitting together. "What do you mean, it won't let you?" "The key," she said, glancing at him. "It's not just a weapon. It's alive, in a way. It senses intentions, emotions. It's choosing something or someone. I don't know why, but I can feel it." Eli opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a sudden vibration rippled through the ground beneath them. Era's wrist device flared brightly, lighting up the tunnel like a flash of lightning. She gasped, clutching her arm as the glow intensified. "What's happening?" Eli asked, his voice tinged with alarm. Era shook her head, her expression a mix of fear and confusion. "I don't know. It's never done this before." The vibration grew stronger, and the walls of the tunnel seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The hum of the key became a high-pitched whine, and Era fell to her knees, her breathing ragged. Eli knelt beside her, grabbing her shoulders. "Aura, talk to me. What's going on?" Before she could answer, the glow from the wrist device erupted into a beam of light that shot down the tunnel, illuminating a hidden chamber just ahead. The walls of the chamber shimmered, etched with strange, alien symbols that pulsed in time with the key's light. Era stared, her heart pounding. "It's activating something. Eli pulled her to her feet, his gaze darting toward the glowing chamber. We don't have time for this. The mercenaries are right behind us. But Era couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the chamber, on the symbols that seemed to call to her. This is why it brought me here, she whispered. It wasn't just about running. It wanted me to find this place. The mercenaries' voices grew louder, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Eli cursed under his breath. We've got company. Ara, whatever this is, make it quick. Ara stepped into the chamber, the light from her wrist device, merging with the glowing symbols on the walls. A sudden rush of energy surged through her, and the symbols began to rearrange themselves, forming a map, a star map. Eli stood at the entrance, his makeshift spear in hand, ready to defend them. Ara, what are you doing? She didn't answer. Her mind was racing, her breath quickening as the map shifted and morphed, revealing a set of coordinates. And then a voice, soft, melodic, and distinctly alien, filled the chamber. Protector identified, the voice said. Human designation. Eli. Era's head snapped toward Eli, her eyes wide. What? Eli looked just as shocked. What the hell is it talking about? The voice continued, calm and unyielding. The key has chosen its protector. Human designation. Eli possesses the necessary traits for activation. Era's chest tightened. This wasn't possible. The key was meant for her people, for someone who understood its power, its danger. Not a human. No, she said, shaking her head. This is wrong. It can't choose him. But the key had already made its decision. The beam of light from her wrist device shifted, enveloping Eli in a glowing aura. He stumbled back, his hands raised in confusion. What's happening to me? He shouted. Era reached out, her voice trembling. It's bonding with you. It's giving you access to the weapon. Eli's eyes widened. I don't want it. I don't even know how to use it. You don't have a choice, Era said, her voice heavy with resignation. The mercenaries burst into the chamber, their weapons drawn. Stop right there, one of them shouted. Eli turned, his body still glowing with the key's energy. Without thinking, he raised his hand, and a wave of pure light erupted from him, knocking the mercenaries off their feet. The energy dissipated, and Eli stood there, breathing hard, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and awe. Era stared at him, her mind reeling. The key had chosen him, a human. For the first time, she wasn't sure if it was the key's wisdom or its mistake that had sealed their fates. We have to leave, she said finally, her voice steady despite the chaos. Eli nodded, still stunned. Where do we go now? Era looked at the star map, its coordinates burned into her mind. To the source of the weapon. To end this, before it's too late. As they fled the chamber, the mercenaries struggling to recover behind them, Era realized the truth. Her worst fear had come to life. A human now held the power to destroy worlds. But perhaps, just perhaps, he might also hold the power to save them. A new hope. The ridge overlooked an expanse of jagged cliffs and shimmering canyons, bathed in the pale light of dawn. The air was thin and cold, but neither Era nor Eli paid it any attention. They stood at the edge, staring at the massive, silver-hued ship hovering silently in the distance. It was unlike anything Eli had ever seen. Sleek, almost alive, its surface pulsing with faint, rhythmic light. It's here, Era said, her voice barely above a whisper. Eli glanced at her. What is it? The Ark, Era replied. It's the heart of the weapon. The key was designed to connect to it, to either activate or destroy it. Eli swallowed hard, his fingers clenching at his sides. The faint glow of the key still pulsed around him, a reminder of the responsibility he never asked for. And you're saying I have to make that decision? Era nodded, her expression grave. The Ark won't respond to me now. The key chose you. It senses something in you that it didn't find in me. Eli shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. I'm just a guy trying to survive. How does that qualify me to decide the fate of whatever this is?" Before Era could answer, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, mechanical hum filled the air, and Eli turned to see the mercenaries' ship breaking through the clouds, its dark silhouette casting a shadow over the ridge. "They found us," Era said, her tone grim. Eli glanced at the Ark, then at Ara. "Can we make it to the ship before they do?" "We don't have a choice," she replied. The two of them took off, sprinting across the uneven terrain. Era's injured leg slowed her, but Eli stayed close, pulling her along when she stumbled. The mercenary ship descended rapidly, its weapons charging with an ominous glow. As they approached the Ark, a low hum resonated from its surface, and a ramp extended toward them. Era stumbled to a stop, her eyes widening. "It's responding to you." Eli hesitated for only a second before grabbing her arm and pulling her up the ramp. The interior of the Ark was breathtaking, an endless expanse of light and energy, the walls alive with shifting patterns and symbols that seemed to breathe. The ramp retracted behind them, sealing out the chaos outside. Eli felt the keys glow intensify, the energy coursing through him like a heartbeat. Ara gestured toward the central console, a massive sphere of light hovering in the center of the room. "That's the core," she said. "The key will interface with it, but you have to decide. Activate the Ark or destroy it." Eli stared at the console, his mind racing. "What happens if I activate it?" Era's gaze dropped. The Ark was designed to end wars. It can destroy entire fleets, wipe out entire planets if necessary. But it was never meant to be used lightly. If you activate it, you'll have the power to decide who lives and who doesn't. Eli's stomach turned. "And if I destroy it?" Era met his eyes. "The power is lost forever. My people will never have their protection. But the humans, and anyone else who seeks it, will never be able to use it for conquest." The console pulsed, as if urging him to make a choice. Before Eli could respond, the Ark trembled. A loud explosion rocked the ship, and the holographic walls displayed the mercenaries breaching the exterior. Ara turned toward him, panic flashing across her face. "They're coming. Eli, you have to decide now." Eli stared at the core, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear. His hands clenched into fists as the weight of the decision pressed down on him. He glanced at Ara, her expression filled with desperation, and then at the glowing console. The voices of the mercenaries grew louder, their footsteps echoing through the Ark. Eli closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'm not going to let this power destroy anyone," he said, his voice steady. With that, he raised his hand and placed it against the console. The key's energy surged through him, and the Ark's light flared brightly. Era shielded her eyes as the ship trembled violently. "What are you doing?" she shouted. Eli's voice was calm but resolute. "Destroying it." The Ark's core began to fragment, the light collapsing inward as the ship's systems whirred to life. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber. "Termination sequence initiated. All energy will be dispersed." The mercenaries burst into the room just as the light exploded outward, engulfing everything. Era cried out, grabbing onto Eli as the energy washed over them. When the light faded, the Ark was gone. The ridge was silent, the mercenaries' ship reduced to smoking debris. Ara and Eli stood alone, the faint glow of the key extinguished. Era stared at the empty space where the Ark had been, her expression unreadable. "It's over," she said softly. Eli looked at her, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. "Did I make the right choice?" Era turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "You made the only choice you could, and for what it's worth, I think my people would have understood." Eli gave a weak smile, the weight of the decision still heavy on his shoulders. "What now?" Era looked toward the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds. "Now we survive. Together." And for the first time, Era allowed herself to hope, not just for her own survival, but for the possibility that humanity, with all its flaws, might one day prove itself worthy of trust.